Welcome to the Human Momentum Podcast. I'm your host, Erik Schabert D.O. If you are looking to optimize your health and avoid or failing that, manage and recover from the illnesses, injuries, and diseases that stop so many of us from moving forward through life, you are in the right place. It's my mission to make this podcast an essential, evidence-based resource for people like you who are looking to know what you can do at home to optimize your health and are looking to gather the information you need to get the most out of your relationships with your doctor and other healthcare professionals. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button if this is your first time here, and please remember to like and share this episode if you find it helpful or informative. Also, be aware that I read all of my comments and will attempt to respond to any questions from my viewers as it is appropriate. With that in mind, let's get on with today's episode. This afternoon, we are going to dive in and try and demystify information about creatine monohydrate. Creatine is one of the most commonly used exercise supplements in the United States, and there has been a lot of research done on it. Now, with all of the information that's available, I still frequently find a lot of really questionable information on creatine on the internet. First off, I've seen claims ranging from creatine can cure diabetes without any adjustments in diet or medication, and that creatine will either prevent or cure Alzheimer's without any additional interventions. And I've seen claims that creatine should be avoided at all costs because it will destroy your kidneys. Well, when we start to analyze the available medical research, none of those claims entirely hold up. But as with most things on the internet, there are some little kernels of truth in there. So let's dive into the research and see if we can't get to the bottom of this and come up with a reasonable approach to using creatine in a number of different settings. First off, let's talk about exercise because there is the most robust data on this topic with creatine. And at this point, I don't think it's in any way debatable that 5 grams per day of creatine has definitive benefit when you're talking about resistance training exercises. So for those that are looking to lift weights or do any other sort of resistance training that will result in building muscle, creatine definitely can improve performance, improve the amount you're able to lift, and it also improves the speed of recovery. So if you are someone who is out there that is looking to add resistance training to your exercise regimen, something that I would recommend for just about everyone, then adding creatine as a supplement makes a good deal of sense. The concerns about kidney damage have largely been overblown. We've had multiple studies showing a great deal of safety with regards to the kidneys. And some of the early reports of kidney damage, when you start to analyze them, they were almost all in extreme endurance athletes like ultramarathoners and adventure runners who were performing activities with a high degree of dehydration involved. And it does appear that if you become quite severely dehydrated, all of the side effects of creatine get worse. And that does introduce the possibility of acute renal failure when you are that dehydrated. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to use creatine in endurance sports anyways, because there really has been no proven benefit. And there has been some evidence that it actually may inhibit endurance sport performance. So not adequately hydrating while using creatine and being involved in activities that have the potential to dehydrate you can certainly cause problems with the kidneys. The other more commonly known side effects of creatine are mostly gastrointestinal, with some nausea, some bloating, some GI upset being common, particularly if you get a little dehydrated. And we also do see with activity-related dehydration that some individuals will suffer muscle spasms and cramps that usually can be reversed relatively quickly by drinking fluids. Okay, so moving on from efficacy in exercise and safety, let's talk about blood sugars and diabetes. So we've had numerous studies over the past 5 to 10 years that have really tunneled in on the effects of creatine in blood sugars. And this started with a group of researchers in the early 2010s who were looking at blood sugars in individuals that were taking creatine in diabetic studies that had nothing to do with creatine monohydrate, but as an ancillary finding, they found that the individuals taking creatine seemed to have consistently better controlled blood sugars than the individuals who weren't. So they completed a prospective study, relatively short term, 12 weeks, and a small study with two groups of 25 patients randomized to either receive a placebo or the creatine. And they did find a statistically significant reduction in hemoglobin A1C and several other measures of blood sugar control with creatine and exercise combined above exercise alone with a placebo. So to try and study exactly why this happened, we had a mouse study that ended up being published in February of 2021 that looked at supplementation with a equivalent dose to 5 grams a day of creatine in one group of mice versus what they called a vehicle or a placebo supplement in the other group of mice. And they did exercise these mice regularly after performing some things to induce an overweight status and diabetes and insulin resistance in these mice. So what they found was creatine plus exercise again outperformed exercise alone plus placebo. And these two studies by themselves are not definitive evidence that creatine is a miracle diabetes cure, but they do strongly suggest that for individuals who are going to exercise anyways, that taking creatine and performing exercise may provide more benefit than exercise alone. And as I would recommend for every diabetic patient who is capable of exercise to include resistance training in their weekly regimen, I think taking creatine with that makes a lot of sense. It's a very low risk intervention, and there is potential that it will have blood sugar related and insulin resistance related benefits beyond those of exercise alone. All right, moving on. Let's go on and talk about Alzheimer's disease, because there's been a lot in the news about creatine potentially being a miracle supplement for Alzheimer's. Well, we do have two relatively important studies that have been published this year with regards to creatine and Alzheimer's disease. And what generated this interest is relatively new data that our old idea that neurofibrillary tangles and amyloid plaques are the exclusive and primary pathology in Alzheimer's was shown to be false, and that the people who originally did the research falsified their data a little bit to make it look like it was conclusive when it really wasn't. Now, the research that was generated by that knowledge, looking for alternative reasons for Alzheimer's, found some very interesting things regarding blood sugars in the brain. And what we found is that insulin resistance on insulin receptors that gate the entry of blood sugar into the brain and other receptors that are involved in allowing neurons in some other neural cells in the brain to make their own insulin, that these mechanisms become impaired in Alzheimer's disease. And that actually may be the pathway that triggers the production of amyloid plaques and neurofibrillary tangles, that those are secondary to blood sugar issues in the brain. Well, knowing that creatine has shown promise in improving insulin resistance and glycemic control in diabetics, there was a thought to check for creatine kinase, which is the actual product of creatine in the body that has biological action, to check creatine kinase levels in the brain. And sure enough, we found that in Alzheimer's disease patients, the version of creatine kinase, CKBB it's called, that is specific to brain tissue, it is reduced in the central nervous system. So the thought was, if we load people with relatively high doses of creatine, 20 grams a day, that will give us a high enough level to allow creatine to penetrate the brain and elevate in the cerebral spinal fluid. And that elevation will allow better glycemic control in the brain and start to reverse some of the pathology that is causing Alzheimer's disease. So to test this theory in a human trial, we had a small 8-week trial of Alzheimer's patients where one group was randomized to receive 20 grams a day of creatine, and the other group was randomized to receive a placebo. And these are individuals with mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease, already diagnosed and with known cognitive and memory dysfunction. And what they found is, at the end of the 8 weeks, the creatine group had consistently improved memory and cognition relative to the placebo group. Very interesting. It's a small study, though, so not quite conclusive. We also, in January of this year, there was a large mouse-based study that looked into the effects of creatine kinase on cognition in mice that they used a set of injections to induce an Alzheimer's state in these mice, and then randomized them to either receive a high-dose creatine or a placebo, and they looked at the outcomes. And what they found was that in this group of mice that had Alzheimer's induced, that when they gave the high doses of creatine, they consistently had better cognitive function than the mouse group that did not receive creatine and got a placebo instead. These are very interesting results, and they are suggestive that creatine may be helpful in Alzheimer's disease, but it's not conclusive. And we do have, by the way, an ongoing prospective trial that is considerably larger than either of these other two trials in humans that is looking at creatine versus placebo for Alzheimer's prevention in high-risk individuals. So we will have to wait and see the results of that trial to say, can creatine actually be useful in preventing Alzheimer's disease? Because we don't know. What I would say is this: for both diabetes and for Alzheimer's, resistance training has been shown to improve cognitive health and to improve blood sugar metabolism universally. So I would definitely recommend resistance training. And if you're going to resistance train, dosing creatine as an add-on makes a lot of sense at 5 grams per day if you're concerned about blood sugars, and at 20 grams per day if you're concerned about memory and cognition. Even at 20 grams per day, the side effect profile of creatine monohydrate is rather benign. And so I think we can safely say that you can go ahead and do that. You just need to try and make a point of staying well hydrated if you're going to take creatine. And side effects are going to be relatively rare, and when they occur, will be relatively mild. So that covers everything I have on creatine today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you're finding this information helpful. Go ahead and share it with anyone you think might want to know a little bit more about creatine. And don't forget to tune in for our future episodes. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.